I don't have any apologies. Yes, Meredith? Oh, you're not late, you're bang on time. I don't have any declarations of interest. Could I have confirmation of the non-confidential minutes of seconder? I'm not. Yeah, thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Are there any matters arising? If not, we'll go to the action sheet. Are there any issues there? Yes. Yeah. You all have a. Let me get back to where I'm in. Put things in order. The action sheet, the Governor's Work Plan, page 13. Huh? Oh, just a placeholder, okay. No leaves of absence, acknowledgements of trip.
Just on your action sheet, you've got 017, road maintenance costing with Maven and Consulting to be done at this next meeting, the next committee meeting, and it hasn't been, it's not on this committee meeting's agenda. I was just wondering what item 017 on the action sheet.
Through the chair, I understand that was presented at the previous RTC and subsequently to council.
Yeah. So we'll move forward.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just my page wasn't in front of me. I have a question. Just in regard to 018, it says a survey of background noise at Gisborne was completed in 2016. I know that a number of petitions into council into this space around noise, etc. Are we looking to redo that survey, being that noise levels appear to have gone up? It doesn't seem to note that. So I know there's a noise improvement program due to fund, but are we going to be resurveying in the now based on recent petitions, I guess? Thanks.
Through the chair, I understand that will contribute to the paper being drafted, perhaps not revisiting, but in light it may be included in the scope. I can confirm that. We have till September to confirm that for you.
Thanks.
Okay, draft governance work plan, page 14. Questions or issues? If there are none, would someone move the recommendation, please? Seconder? Put it to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. The contrary, carried. Page 17. Variations to the Regional Land Transport Plan. I understand that there has been a discussion with Emma on this prior to the meeting, and we don't have to make any alterations. Is that correct, Emma, if you'd care to explain?
Sure. The key thing with this one is that we need to keep projects in the RLTP, but not seek funding from the NLTP. So they need to be in the RLTP in order to be considered for the PGF funding, because that's a condition for the PGF. So as long as they stay in the RLTP, but we clarify that they're not seeking funding from the National Land Transport Fund, that's fine.
So we don't have to move these recommendations.
Through the chair, I think we're seeking a new recommendation clarifying that we won't be seeking funding through the NLTP.
Someone move.
Something of the like.
No?
Mr. Chairman, can we just have that a bit clearer? Sorry, I was slightly distracted for a moment. We need to know whether the East Cape Road bluffs are in regardless of the funding, are they in 2018 or are they being removed from
No,
2018?
they're not. They're in the current work schedule.
Then the recommendation needs to be reworded because it's
Right.
actually saying removed.
Right.
It's not talking about funding, it's actually talking about whether they're in or out.
That's correct, and I asked
So somebody
someone
needs,
do
we
that
can't do it
accordingly.
from here, but somebody needs to make a new recommendation.
Yes. So through the chair, if we can recommend to remove the current recommendation to A and replace with wording to the like of the RTC clarifies we will not be seeking from the NLTP.
Is that sufficient to do it? Well, I'll move accordingly. I've got a seconder. Thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those, in-
Before you do, Mr. Chairman, I think you need to be really clear that that work is still going to stay. And that recommendation doesn't sound like it was saying. If anyone goes back to look at this paper trail, you've got a recommendation that removes it. You're going away with this. But we just need to be clear that those two pieces of work will continue, but not with funds from the RLTP. So perhaps, Emma, could you help us?
It's not with funds from the NLT.
Yes, so could you help us with a recommendation that makes it clear the work will proceed?
I think all we need to do is approve variation to remove the funding request from NLTF.
And you can easily put because it is now covered, been undertaken with the PGF.
Mm.
And that makes it clear.
But it doesn't take it out of the RLTP. So we just need to make sure it's not being removed from
I
that.
just wanted to clarify the point to Councillor McLean, that I sought an assurance and got an assurance that the work plan included the East Cape Bluff program in this current season, work season.
Certainly,
That's
Mr.
easy
Chairman,
enough.
but I want to see it in writing and I want to see us keep it in writing. That's what the issue is.
That's, Mr. Chairman, for us to understand, we sort of know what's going on, but this is a public document, and to make it clear in the recommendations, as we've just suggested, I think there's a whole lot there.
The recommendation is we approve the removal of funding from the National Land Transport Plan. Is that sufficient to get it done?
And replace it with funding from the PGF fund.
Yes, the Provincial Growth Fund to specifically accommodate the East Cape.
Yes.
Well,
Work
it just
schedule?
goes on to, that could stay.
So then that leaves it in the RLTP, that just clarifies that we're not seeking funding from the NLT. And because funding.
You got that all there?
provided from the budget.
Removing funding from NLTF
And replace with a Provincial Growth Fund funding.
So read it through, start to finish, I think you are the.
Approve, remove funding from the National Land Transport Plan,
F fund
sorry,
and replace it.
and replace it with the Provincial Growth Funding. Put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Or have we already done that?
No, but you have to ask the mover if he's prepared to change.
Sorry, well, will the mover change that or adjust it?
You have,
I did.
I'm happy to have second.
We're convoluting things today, okay. All in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Where are we now? Page 26. 26. No, 26.
22.
Oh, sorry. 22, update on transport policy projects. Aye. Oh, thank you, Joe.
Kia ora tātou. So you'll see we've given a general update on a number of transport sort of matters of interest to the Regional Transport Committee. So happy to take questions on any of those. Just a bit of an update on the update, if you will. The network operating framework. So the consultant Cardno is actually having a workshop with staff from council NZTAT roads tomorrow to further develop that project. So it is on track to have some outputs by July, at which stage we'll undertake a consultation process. The spatial plan. So it says that we've recently completed the targeted engagement phase. In fact, what it should read is we've recently completed the first part of the targeted engagement phase because there is more engagement to come. So I just wanted to clarify that. So we're just currently looking at how that will be rolled out, particularly to capture the views of some of our townships, youth engagement, and also iwi hapu views on the spatial plan. Regional land transport plan. So we will be bringing a detailed project plan back to the Regional Transport Committee on how that will be rolled out. There are some high-level timeframes included in the appendix, just to give you an idea of what that could look like. It's going to be an important piece of work for the Regional Transport Committee over the next year and a half. And then there's just a general update on some things that are happening at a national level, and NZTA may provide a bit more detail on some of those. So these national policy directives we do need to be aware of, as they need to be reflected and taken into account when we do our regional transport planning.
Question, Ms. Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Joe, just in regards to the spatial plan, I'm really cognizant around this table, we have quite, groups of interest to our community. Were these groups represented, be it well or in those spatial plan meetings? I'm really aware that if we're going to consider our roading network in its entirety, etc., I was just interested to know whether the sectors that we have in our regional transport, are they specific groups that could be or were a part of or are going to be inquired of?
So Activate Tairāwhiti have definitely been involved. We haven't had much engagement in terms of the access and mobility sector, although we have spoken with the health board. Whether they've fed the message out, I don't know. And we're still working on their iwi and hapu engagement.
Further questions?
Ask what you hear. We've had some issues over time of projects that have been in the wind for quite some time, and when we ask where we're at with them, they say we're waiting for consent. And there has been talk about streamlining that process. Have you any updates on how that's going to happen, or is that relative to this?
So through the chair, the global consent is something that we've been putting through on the roading side. So we have an application sitting with our consenting team at the moment to do the global consent. It's currently just getting some further information back for it. So we have a consent that will take out, I think there's 300 odd consents that we have for a certain type of work. It'll take care of almost 200 of those straight away if that consent goes through in the current form we're taking it at. We're working with our regulatory team to make sure that we can widen it as much as possible so we can make a lot of our work permitted activity. But we're looking forward to that hopefully coming through in the next few weeks.
Through the chair, where some aspects of engagement have been missed, the door is still open and more than welcome if wanting to be involved in that.
Through the chair. Who do I contact about that? Because access and mobility is definitely something that needs to be, I note there's not a single mention of any sort of accessibility issues in any of the feedback. So it would be good for the sector to have something to say. I'm sure it's got lots to say. So
Yeah, please contact me. And there's also a Shape Tairāwhiti website, so shapetairāwhiti.gov.nz. And you can also, there's a spatial plan email you can contact as well. But I can give you the details.
okay, thank you. Thank you.
Any further questions on the issue? Would someone move the recommendations, please? Thank you. A seconder? Put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. I've got ahead of myself. Public input and petitions. You have a letter in front of you all from Mrs. Erin Jones. It's a continued plea through us to the Transport Agency to do some work on the Tatapari Hill. I can't say that I know where things are right at present, but that's, Emma might know, or
And we have certainly, our people have been working and talking to Erica about the, all of the, Erin, about all the issues that she's raised since Erica's death. And I think that's, and it is an incredible commitment that she is showing to see some good come out of obviously a really traumatic experience. We are looking at all of the issues that she's raised about the road safety, and we are looking at it in the context of safe systems approach. So we look at all the different aspects of the roadside, the speed, the vehicles and the behaviours. So we are looking at all of those things. I don't have any specific announcements to make today, but we are hopeful that we will have some more progress that we can announce relatively soon.
thank you for that. Emma, any more questions at all?
Yes, you're Mr. Chair.
You're going to call me on, or weren't you?
First, I commend, obviously, in light of, we have had a deputation to full council from the Jones whānau. So, we're really heartened, in this space. It's heavy on us as well, being that the death occurred on one of our local roads or one of our highways. I just would really, she's asking, and the whānau are asking to impress upon, as we do when we advocate. We've since had 5 deaths on State Highway 35, and I know in the recent meeting we discussed safety is paramount. It's one of our government's highest frameworks in the roading network discussions. So we want to really affirm that this is definitely a matter that we take seriously and that we are working on, and as Emma has just noted, they are aware of. So I just, in her letter to us, there are some notes around feeling ignored. So I just, to go into bat and to state, it's really important that feedback goes to the whānau, I guess, and we do follow through. So this is the first time you've seen this letter, I assume. So will you respond to it? Will the NZTA, on behalf of, in that space, be responding to this letter?
And the first thing is the letters to the Transport Committee. Certainly, no one is ignoring her in relation to this. Some of the, in terms of actually taking action on this, it does take some time to work through to make sure that whatever we do does make the system safer. And what we don't want to do is simply come back and say yes, and then have to turn around and say no. So it's important in taking this very seriously that we do the work that's needed to be able to say, here is the right response in this corridor. And it won't be one thing, it will be multiple things, but we need to do those things together and talk to the community, because these are things that will impact other road users and other members of the community. So we will be doing all of those things, and look, we are looking at them, and we will get to a point where we can come out and say, here are the suite of things we can now consult with the community on. And we will certainly be going back to Erin on that when we have that certainty.
You'll pass that on, Meredith?
Supplementary, will this committee be doing a reply to this letter? Is that intended, or, yeah?
If that is the direction of the committee, we can draft.
Well, I think we should respond in the affirmative, yes. Thank you.
I support that. Thank you.
This is of real interest to our fans.
Sorry, can you just...
Sorry, 2 very, very close misses over the last 2 or 3 months. But I am buoyed by the national activities. I think that's our next agenda point that specifically refers or encompasses some of the questions that Erin has.
Thank you for that. Nothing further? not, we'll move to page 34. No? Didn't we? Oh, can we have a mover for the recommendations? Just noting, yeah. Seconder, thank you. I'll put that to the table. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary carried. Thank you for that. David. Well, you can talk.
It's me.
Emma.
Kia ora tātou. So we're providing our usual update across all the activities underway in the agency, and note that we will also had a discussion with council and staff on Tuesday, and that was really appreciated, the opportunity to hear from you and the issues that you're raising and are concerned about. What we've been spending quite a bit of time on is funding and prioritisation for all the projects in the National Land Transport Programme. With the change of government and the significant shift in the government policy statement and priorities for this government, we've needed to really work through in quite a lot of detail what was included in the NLTP. And what we also found is we had quite a lot of projects that had carried over from our previous NLTP because of delays in completion. And we were facing really considerable increases in construction costs, which I know has been an issue up here. So we've gone now through all the projects and activities in the National Land Transport Programme in the areas of public transport, walking and cycling, local road improvements, and the local road part of the regional improvements activity classes. And working through that to be really clear with all of our co-investing partners where we think projects are likely to be funded in this NLTP, which we have 2 more years to go, and which ones are probably unlikely to be funded at this stage because there simply isn't enough money, and given the way things proceed, even though we over-program to a certain amount so that we can keep things moving, so that when one thing comes off, there's something else ready to take its place, we still think we won't get everything that we've put in the program funded this year or this NLTP period. What we're also doing is reviewing our investment decision-making framework, and that's really to take a broader view of all the factors that we should be considering and weighting in the way we consider and prioritise activities in the fund. And we've also been doing work to improve and streamline our decision business case process. So the investment decision-making framework, this is really key because this drives how we assess and rank projects within the system. And with the changes to GPS, we've recognised we needed to really work through this in a really systematic way. So we have a review underway, and we're working with Local Government New Zealand, Ministry of Transport, Ministry for Environment, Ministry of Health, Housing and Urban Development, Treasury, and all of the councils as well, to look at how we do that and feed that into what we do in future. So it will take some time. So we've been investigating it. We're into the design, just about to head into the design stage, and then we're looking to implement it next year. So that will take a broader view because of that emphasis on social, economic, cultural and environmental factors, whereas previously there was probably greater weighting on economic and efficiency type aspects of the activities. Linked with that, we're doing work on streamlining our business case approach, and this has been a result of the feedback we have had from our partners in terms of wanting to ensure that the business cases are appropriate to the size and scale of the project, and that where we have activities that are really the same everywhere in the country, that we're not requiring full new business cases for everything. So we've launched this and are now working through it. So it has systems like essentially a one-page entry point, starting point for these, to really work through how much complexity there is and therefore how complex the business case would need to be. And so quite a lot of the improvements that sit within low cost, low risk, and some of the safety interventions will go through a much more streamlined approach now. And we think that's really important. And we recognise that there were certainly some instances where the costs of business cases were approaching the same, potentially the same cost or very similar costs to the actual interventions. And we didn't want to have a situation that was creating that sort of imbalance. So that's, I think, really important, and we'll keep looking at that over the next year and ensuring that those processes are as complex as they need to be. I mean, where we have really large scale complex investment activity, then we do need to have robust business cases, but for the straightforward repeated activities, we're doing something that's fit for purpose. One of the really key shifts, and I've talked about it, I think, at every RTC, is the importance of safety. So the government has really made this its priority, and we are investing 1.4 billion in the Safe Network program during this NLTP. And we've already rolled out quite a program on 10 rural highways, and we've got another 13 underway now through the Boost program. And we are looking also at roads and roadsides, so that's where you've seen new barriers coming up, rumble strips, and in some places we're able to do some shoulder widening. And these are things that provide more resilience in the road corridor, so that there's either more room for recovery, or if there is a hazard on the side of the road, it helps to ensure that people don't hit that at great speed head on or side on in ways that are likely to result in deaths and serious injuries. Speed is another one of our real priority areas, and we are looking at a whole range of corridors. So we've got two things underway. One is looking region by region at a whole speed management approach, where we look at all of the roads in a region, local roads and state highways, and say what is the safe and appropriate speed for every part of that system. And that's being rolled out over 3 years. We also identified, and we've had feedback in particular from this community, for example, that there are particular corridors or parts of roads that have a high risk, have high levels of deaths and serious injuries, where a faster review of speed and consideration of changes to speeds is appropriate. So we're just working through some of those, and again, we hope to be able to come back to you and identify where we're going to be doing that in the next month or so. We have a new advertising campaign, Your Speed is Shared, which we've had a huge amount of feedback on, which is really focusing on how passengers experience people driving at speed when they feel nervous and uncomfortable, and really trying to create the starting point for conversations that help people to say to the driver that they're uncomfortable or feeling unwell when people are driving at a speed that doesn't feel safe. The other thing that we know is that regardless of what causes a crash, when it happens at speed, the seriousness of the outcome in terms of deaths and serious injuries is much greater. So travelling at safe speeds for the road and the conditions is always going to be something that we will encourage and support. So that's really important for us, and there's more information on our website. When you look at, if you Google speed and NZTA, we've got more information on the website. Urban mobility and mode shift. Now this is also something that I know this community's been really keen on, which is how do we improve walking, cycling, public transport and choice for people in communities. And so this is a priority for the government. They want mode shift. They want more people, particularly in urban areas, having alternatives to single occupant car journeys, and people feeling that it is safe and easy for them to use alternative modes. So we're continuing to work on this to provide guidance that everybody can use, and working with people on their plans for this. This fits also really quite well with the spatial planning emphasis that this government has, and with the council's update on the work on spatial planning. What we're hearing and seeing is a lot more emphasis on integrated planning. So thinking about where new housing developments are going, where schools are growing, where retirement villages are going, all of those sorts of things, and thinking about that in terms of how people then access and get to and from those places and other places in the community. And so the government's placing a lot more emphasis on the visibility of that planning, and then seeing that feed into the transport system planning as well. So anything that you're doing in that space, we have a real interest in. So the spatial planning, the network operating framework and plan, all of those things are really important parts of understanding what the best things to do in the community are. And certainly, if there are areas where you would like access to more expertise or to find out if we've got more guidance, please don't hesitate to contact us. One of the things we're doing at the moment is wanting to hear from our partners about how things are going and how the relationship with us is, and what you'd like to see more of or less of, or apart from money. You know, everyone generally wants to see a bit more money, but actually to see what value we're providing to you, and what else, or what other things that we could do that would be of value to you. So when you, those of you who receive that survey, please do fill it in and give us your feedback. And of course, you can always give me feedback as well. So you can use all the channels available to you, but it is really important to us that we hear from you, and that we can then listen, and if there's things that we need to be doing better, that we'll take action to do those things. Now, moving into this region in particular. So looking at the Provincial Growth Fund activities, there's been a huge amount of planning and activity underway, and I'm delighted that we have a signed contract. Nadine said she was going to frame it. So that's fantastic. So in the 2-year program, in terms of the state highway activities, we've already done assessment of the bridges that need upgrading for HPMV, and there's a few up at the Opotiki end that need work, so we're progressing with those. We're looking at the resilience projects to improve the resilience on State Highway 35, working in partnership with GDC, and the Makamuka realignment. We're engaging with Hapu and ensuring that we have taken into account their views before we go through that consenting process. In the 5-year program of activities, we've got State Highway 2 Waikari Gorge and the State Highway 2 passing opportunities. So we have our funding for the detailed business cases has been approved, and we're underway with those and working with iwi as well on, particularly in the Waikari Gorge program around the issues there. And continuing just to ensure that we are going to deliver on the PGF criteria in terms of supporting that economic growth and employment opportunities in the region. Other construction updates, obviously the Gladstone Bridge work is largely completed, and the team's now really focusing on looking at the handrail options to ensure that it is safe for all users. So that's still underway. Awapuni Road has been completed, and thank you for all the feedback on that. Jolly Stockman intersection completed, and Motu Bridge Southern End works are scheduled to get underway in September this year. And the summer maintenance program in terms of resealing of State Highways 2 and 35 is largely completed. There's a couple of sites that didn't get done during that summer season that will be done next year. So certainly I think those of you who regularly drive 35 will have noticed some quite significant sections that have been improved there. Safe Roads Boost program. So this was safety improvements on the State Highway 2 and 35 corridors that were identified. So there's been quite a lot of work going in there to look at how we identify the areas that are at risk, that fall within those corridors, and apply the treatments that are appropriate for those situations. And that's expected to be completed mid to late this year. And finally, we're continuing to work through with the council in terms of the shift to our partnership, so that we can make sure we have a smooth transition. And the really critical thing is that we will continue to work very closely together, because we see the value that we've got through looking at the whole network, and we want to continue to do that. And so we will continue to work very closely with the council and with our teams, and ensure that certainly whenever any customer has an issue, that we operate as seamlessly as possible. And that's the end of that.
Are you looking at going over the top of the Waikari Gorge?
The team's looking at a realignment, but exactly where that will go is yet to be determined.
And secondly, and just following up from what my colleague here mentioned earlier, in the last 12 months, maybe, at least before Christmas up till now, it just seemed like every time I was on the road, there was a potential for a serious accident somewhere. You know, like I live out in the country and I go home at night, and along straight there by Jerkins, and there's cars upside down the drain, and it just seemed like every week you'd be coming across this sort of incident, you know, by the Waipara bridges, cars in the Kiwi Fruit, and I've had cars come across the lane and hit me, right across the lane, and hit me. I've seen another one just the other day, and it seemed like for 45 years or 47 years of driving, I don't think I really experienced this sort of carrying on. In the last 12 months, it's happening every week. And that's what Murray mentioned before in the last week. And it just seems like it's reflective also in some of those, no, most of those were the potential for possibly a fatal, you know, but obviously they weren't all because they involved one car, but if another car had been in the road at the time. And we see the road toll rising with it, and it just seems to be reflective of what we're reading in the media with road tolls and I'm wondering, is there actually any documentation of why? Like, have we got documentations noting all these prangs to start with in serious accidents with regard to drugs and alcohol, speed? I know that they do investigate these, but I'd like to see some sort of graphing to see if there's a standout there that we need to focus on, because it's all very well saying, oh, let's focus on rumble strips or on safety barriers, but if the prime cause of what I'm seeing on the roads in the last 12 months, and same with up the coast, these accidents on the coast road, it never used to happen like that. But yeah, Larry's indicating something there, I'm not quite sure what he's saying. But,
And
well,
Graham,
okay, I'm sorry, but
yeah.
but I think we need to know that, because we're the ones who are, and you could put them into several headlines like drugs and alcohol, or you could break those up into drugs and alcohol, speed, carelessness, phones, whatever. And we're the ones who are charged with making our roads safe, but we haven't seen that sort of detailed stats to know if we're actually focusing in the right place.
So a couple of things there. One is that we are looking at developing some DSI reporting to RTCs, so deaths and serious injuries. So looking at what's happening right across the country and providing some consistent reporting to RTCs so that you do have information taken from the analytics. It's there's some lags in terms of that and so on. So there's just a few challenges. So we're working through that, but we are looking at how we can present information back to you in a useful, consistent form so that you can see what it's the long-term trends is probably the most useful and important information in some of that. The other point is that the evidence, both from overseas and from what we're seeing here, is that the trying to identify any single key factor across the board, we're not seeing evidence of any specific thing that we can definitively say, this is the thing that's driving the shift. It's happening across a whole range of things, which is why we really have to go with the evidence as when you take a safe systems approach and you look at all of those aspects of what's going on, is where you start to see the change. So, because it's a combination of the road itself, the roadsides, the speed, the behaviours, in the vehicles. And we talked on Tuesday about around 67% of deaths and serious injuries are happening in 1- and 2-star vehicles. And so thinking as a country about what do we do about 1- and 2-star vehicles is one part of the picture. It's not the only part. Around 100 people a year die because they're not wearing a seatbelt. So how do we change that behaviour? Because that seems to be a relatively straightforward one if we could make that happen. And then so we need to be looking at every one of those factors, including the driver behaviour and impairment and distraction and so on, because they all have a role to play in what we're seeing. And I've had these discussions at other RTCs, and we try and look across the data and say, is it a state highway, a rural road, is it weather, is it time of day, and so on. And we're just not getting really consistent patterns that show us that there's an overriding factor in there. It is right across.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question to you, Emma. The Moti Bridge has been completed now for a year or so, and it's really nice to have a good bridge. However, 2K leading up to the bridge from the south side is a bit of a disaster. And you talk about wanting acceptable roads. Well, I would deem that as not acceptable, especially in a 100K area. And I'm just wondering, or have I missed something somewhere along the line? Is it going to be addressed pretty soon?
Well, we have the southern approach work still to be done. I'm not sure how far south it goes.
Not 2 days. It's just first beam, I think.
So when's that going to happen?
This September this year.
Oh, 3 months. Okay, and the other question is in here on the Connect statement here, it says acceptable roads. What's acceptable? I mean,
That's, I'm not sure, that's the council feedback
I'll ask
summary.
council, what do you see as acceptable, my standard, which could be different to my acceptable, as opposed to safe?
So through the chair, the levels of service for our local roads are set by our council. One of the things we're looking at is in the next council meeting is around the levels of service for our roads so that we can set those. Levels of service are very much one of those things that can have a 4-lane highway, but we have to pay for it. So it is very much around where that level of service is. So how many potholes over 100 metres are we okay with? Is it none? Is it 1? It's not 20. So how do we then work through it? So we have some roughness indicators and all of those things already in our contracts. It's making sure whether or not they're still fit for purpose going forward, and that's what we'll be workshopping at the next council.
I'm hopeful we'll have at least a draft version by then. So it will depend a bit on getting all the data in the right place.
I have 2 questions for
Yeah.
you. Given that you talk to many regional transport committees, is it driver behaviour or straight out speed? It's the main problem.
I can't provide you with a definitive answer on that, but what I can say is if people are driving at speed and they make a mistake, the consequences are much more serious. So, and I think that's one of the things about the safe systems and the way we think about it is we know that people will make mistakes. And I don't think anyone who drives here will be able to hand on heart say they've never made a mistake while driving. And sometimes those mistakes are a momentary loss of concentration, changing the heater or the radio, or, you know, hope no one's using their cell phone, but, and other times it's misjudging how close another vehicle is, or a risk in the road, a puddle across the road. You know, there's lots of things where people make mistakes. People get in their cars under the influence of drugs and alcohol. That's a pretty serious mistake. People overtake when they can't see that there's a clear road ahead. And that has terrible consequences. But people make mistakes. So that's one of the reasons why we tried to create a road environment that is resilient, that allows people recovery space. Recently, I was in the unfortunate situation where I ended up, the car was overtaking and we're going around a corner, and I was the oncoming vehicle who was overtaking another one. And we were 3 abreast going around a corner on a 2-lane road. And it was sheer luck, A, that there was enough room for 3 vehicles to be abreast, and B, that there was no one behind me because they wouldn't have had any room to manoeuvre. Now, I could look at the vehicle and I could make an assumption that that driver was probably impaired in some way. But everyone else and the road itself was fine. So we avoided that potentially poor outcome. So yes, driver behaviour and the choices and mistakes that drivers make are part of the picture. Speed will always mean a worse outcome if you're going at a higher speed. And then there's all the other bits and pieces and the vehicle and the buckle up and all those other things. So the more we can do at every point to educate our young people, our drivers, our friends, our family, to encourage all those good behaviours, the better. And, you know, we work with our friends in the police to enforce that and so on. And I know people here have raised concerns about logging trucks, and I know talking to the industry and the freight people and the forestry people, they want that social licence to operate. They do want to have good driver behaviour. That means that their drivers are safe and their freight is getting to where it needs to go. So the more we keep working on attitudes, approaches and commitment to doing the right thing, the better. And investing in the treatments on roads and road signs that we know save lives and help people. and rumble strips are a great one. We've seen some really good emerging data happening from some of the installations we did about a year ago on the South Island, reduction in runoff crashes, things like that. So hopefully we'll start to get some data that we can actually really use and demonstrate the value of it back to the communities where we have it. But until we have a definitive answer, we'll keep working on every bit of the system that we can.
My second question is, in the northern sector,
Mm.
how much investigative work is done on passing lanes? Between Gisborne and Tolliver, it's pretty good highway with more than enough passing lanes, but you go north, and it's a real issue. I mean, it's nothing to be stuck behind 2 or 3, sometimes 5 logging trucks, 4 or 5 vehicles,
Mm.
be they cars or utes, and it's a long time before you get the opportunity to
Yeah.
get past.
We're always going to have more desire for things like passing lanes than we have funds to do them. And so we do have to look at where the traffic volumes are and where the priority goes, and also on where we can actually build a safe passing lane. So the practice now is that we will not put passing lanes in if they're not safe. And what we've learned is that you actually need a pretty long runoff at the end of the passing lane for that to be safe. So what we find now is that some of those more challenging parts of the network, there aren't actually any safe places for passing lanes. We do work with the trucking industry, and I know that most drivers are pretty good at pulling over where there are wide roadside areas that allow them to pull over for people to safely pass. But there will always be a limit, so we are looking at more passing opportunities on State Highway 2, because that's the priority connection north and south. But I don't think we're looking at any in that northern part of 35 at this stage.
Given that there's a tentative build-up in more harvesting and logging, and we've had 2 serious fatalities in the last month, 6 weeks. One comment that has been passed or slung in my direction is that if there was a passing lane where the logging truck was involved, this may not have happened. That's why I'm asking the question. How much work has been done in the northern area in terms of investigating the opportunity for passing lanes? Thank you for
Yeah.
that.
We'll look at that, but it does come back to human error.
Yes, yeah.
And, you know, the travel time delay that people perceive is usually only in the order of a few minutes. And that's one of the big messages we need on these roads they're not, you know, big straight highways. They are rural highways, and they are in windy environments. And so we do need to really encourage people to be conscious that a few minutes delay in their whole journey is not worth dying for. And really, that's one of the messages we need to keep getting across, because we're not going to be able to put passing lanes everywhere. And so we need people to relax and chill out. And Ollie and I did the drive a couple of weeks ago, and we had some areas where we spent quite a bit of time behind a couple of trucks. And it was raining, and you know, visibility wasn't great. And we just sat there, and I don't think it made any difference to our overall travel time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was listening to an interview with a road transport drivers group representative about a month ago. And what they wanted, what he was advocating for, was for WorkSafe New Zealand to investigate every accident involving heavy transport. Matt, you might know a bit more about. I think at the moment they police WorkSafe only involved when I may be wrong, when the police request it.
Sorry, I should introduce myself. I'm not Matt Broderick.
Okay.
I'm Dan Foley. I'm his 2IC. and I've come today to represent him, but yeah, WorkSafe, I think they generally only investigate incidents that happen off the roading network. It's on the roading network, it's us.
Yeah, well, that was their request, and they spoke not only about individual actions, they also spoke about a wider social and economic context in which drivers were operating. So, and I think for them to articulate that on a national forum was worthy of interest, because as my colleague says, we want really good data. So how are we going to get that data? You know, what are the methods? That's really our first question, I think. Yeah, so but certainly it made good sense that WorkSafe investigate every accident, because every accident is a potential fatality when a heavy truck's involved.
Thank you, Mary. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I just go back to the beginning of your presentation, Emma, which was at a national level, I think. And on that very first slide, you put up that your focus is going to be on people in place ahead of vehicles and networks. And I think that does ring some alarm bells, because at the end of the day, we wouldn't be talking about a road if it wasn't for vehicles and network. And we have to be mindful of the letter that we all have in front of us today from Mrs. Jones. So I'd be really concerned if nationally the policy is to put people in place ahead of vehicles and networks. So that was the very words that were in the script. And it's together that we need to see all those elements come together and be funded to make roads as safe as we possibly can. Now, we know some of our highways are narrow, and we're realistic enough to understand that it's not going to be funded to be as wide as we might all like immediately for the volume of traffic that we have. But we still need it to be safe for those who travel it every day. And I appreciate that you took a trip around the coast, and on a nice day trip, even if it is raining, once is not quite right for people that need to use it every single day and several times a day. So they come to it with a slightly different psyche, I suggest. So thank you for taking the time to go, but I'd be really concerned if we aren't making sure that the roads, the design and the mahi at the highest level, which is I think what you were alluding to, doesn't look at the whole issue of vehicles, networks, because this district would cease to exist economically if we didn't have trucks on the road, be whatever kind of trucks. They might be carting Councillor Thompson's citrus. They might be counting someone else's livestock or someone else's timber. And they provide work for hundreds of our local people as they travel up the coast to go to those workplaces every day. So it needs to be looked at as a whole, not just in isolation.
I think we're in violent agreement. It is a recalibration, but when we talk about people in place, it's actually about recognising that for this place, this community has particular characteristics. It has its own regional economy. It has things that are important to the people who live, work, visit here. So it is actually putting that into our system much more perhaps than we have previously, and putting people in there, and it's actually about people's journeys, not necessarily just about vehicle journeys that matter as part of this. So it's not throwing the rest out, it's bringing up the importance of people in place alongside vehicles and networks. It may not have come across like that, but I'm happy to clarify it.
Yes, again, thank you, Emma, for always a thorough report on what is happening in this space. Certainly it's a big space, a lot of work, and in a very challenging network, being that our geography, geology and aerology we could consider really. But one of the key frameworks of our region feed forward from our resident ratepayer citizen here obviously is the impact of heavy traffic, high use in the space of the logging industry, forestry industry, of course, but also other high performance motor vehicles and the growth of those in our region. There's no doubt, we don't disagree, that's had a huge impact into this region. But when it comes to loss of life on a highway, and again, we've seen considerable concerns with technology advancing and cell phone use on roads. We do see it, and it is a worry. One of the key concerns from people is how fast we act to find the solution or to consider the best moving forward. And obviously we all get hammered a little about the bureaucracy that sits behind making the decisions to moving forward. So is it that we need to meet with, you know, I mean, I know that the Transport Agency is having community consults and meeting engagements, but I just feel that there are people that do have a vested interest, obviously, in the concerns after the tragic loss of life, but there are others that are asking the questions across the broader sector, from disability, from, you know, from obviously the police do their part in meeting with you to assure that people are driving safely, and you know, the police are on the roads watching for speed and all those things. But is there a gap in this space to qualify that the bureaucracy isn't holding things up, it's just how it is, and funding, prioritising and all those things? Because for me sitting here today, you know, I'm pro-rail because I see the benefit of it in taking off some vehicles from the roadways. It's not just about having it because it seems like a nice dream to have the benefits to cost ratio and economics. And it seems bureaucracy holds that up because of those in power don't believe its benefits. So how do we, you know, kind of have this real solid meat to discuss all the benefits for the whole, and how long does it have to take? Because we don't want to, as council, keep having whānau come to see us after the death of a loved one to highlight, you know, more barriers or whatever. So how do we ensure they are being heard, and the timeliness of processing that through to actual outcomes that make this region a safer, more connected network overall? Do we, you know, should we be meeting more robust and having kind of key outcomes? I know they're all there, but it just seems at the moment we are sitting in a challenged space that doesn't appear to have, well, maybe solid answers for some people in our community. And here we are as a regional transport committee to the police. Have they got a new safety program they're rolling out, highlighting, you know, use of devices in cars, trucks, to the regional transport committee. You know, we oversee all this, but what's the actions for moving forward that are going to make a meaningful difference in the lives of our people in this region? Because we still seem to meet about the same things time and time again. And that was asked in the letter. Bureaucracy, is it stalling, or is it just simply, it's just the priorities that we have to go through?
I think there are quite a few questions in there, Meredith. Look, the role of the RTC is actually really a critical and essential part of the system, because it is what develops and determines the regional land transport plan. So that is a critical part of this. And as a result of the work that's been done here and through the ITPP work, for example, even though that took some time, the investment in this region is significantly higher than it's ever been before. The National Land Transport Fund investment's up by 47%, this RLTP, this NLTP from the previous one. And on top of that, there's the Provincial Growth Fund that we were able to access because we'd done the planning and thinking, which really did look at the issues and the concerns of everyone in the community in terms of the road network in the areas that, both on local roads and state highways, that were causing problems or challenges. Now, both those funds have particular criteria around them, and that is the way that government funds, and we have to work within that. And there's never enough money for everything that people want to do. So we do have to prioritise. But then within that, within the funding things, there are opportunities to be agile and respond to issues as they come up. So within the local road maintenance activities, the team can identify where something is urgently required that wasn't previously identified. Same thing we can do on the state highway program, where they're low cost, low risk type of activities. And then when there is a bigger program as government rolls out other safety programs, again, we bring those in. Now, yes, there's a time to get there, but that's because we need to make sure that we design those interventions based on good information and analysis of the situation and what will have the greatest benefit. Because again, we have to ensure that we're providing value for money in that. So there are steps in those processes. And where government commits to funding something and says, for example, if we look at the rail potentially south to Wairoa, you know, the Provincial Growth Fund has funded a feasibility study both into rail and into cycleway. So those things will go through a process to identify those options and evaluate them so that a decision can be made. So yes, some of those things take time. There is the ability to move, and as you will have seen around the committee, if the region, either the agency or the council identifies the need to bring a new program into the plan and prioritise it above other activities, that can be done as well. And a lot of these are big, it's large scale infrastructure, so it does take time. We do have to get consents, we do have to go through all those processes. So is it as quick as everyone wants all the time? No, but that's why we're making changes to the business case process, that's why we're looking at streamlining approvals for standard treatments so that we can do some things faster. And
Where we want speed, we can't have it.